Okay, so I think we're gonna get started. Thanks. Still connecting. Thanks to everybody who was able to join us. We're really excited to have you guys here. If you haven't already, please do introduce yourself in the chat box and let us know your name and what you're drinking, so we can all get to know each other a little bit, even if it's from afar. So I want to again thank everybody for joining us tonight. And I'd also like to thank Aslan Brewing us on this first virtual Pints for Preservation. We had hoped to work with them on an in-person event at some point this summer, but obviously the world had some different plans for us. And so we're really excited that Will and Maddie and everyone were willing to try something super new with us and see how it goes. The added bonus of that, of course, is that we have folks that are not in Bellingham. So I know Jay's calling in from Tacoma. I'm here in Seattle, and I can see from the list that we have people from all over the place, which is really fun. I would also like to go ahead and thank our sponsors that have helped make today's program possible. So that includes the Daily Journal of Commerce, Bassetti Architects, Daniels Real Estate, Coughlin, Porter and Lundeen, Legacy Renovation Products and Services. Oh, thanks, Jay. The Masonry Institute of Washington, Raff and Company, SHKS Architects, and Swenson Seyfage. I also want to give a quick shout out. I cannot see if we have them on the call today, but quick shout out to Bellingham's Main Street program, the Downtown Bellingham Partnership. Before we get started, I do have a few housekeeping notes, although I'm sure all of you are like old pros at Zoom happy hours by this point. You guys all know, all the attendees, you do know that you're in listen and watch mode only. However, we really want to be hearing from you guys throughout. You all already figured out how to use the chat box, which is great. If you have any comments or questions or tech issues, just put them in the chat box. We're going to be moving around the space, or Will is going to be moving around the space. I will be sitting here in this chair. We're going to be moving around the space. So if things get like a little glitchy or you can't hear, like give it a second, be patient, we'll get things back. But if it's kind of like a prolonged tech issue, throw it in the chat box. You can like direct message me and I will help work with you on tech. If you do have questions for Will or for Jay or for any of us that you want to like talk about as a group, please do use that Q&A option on the bottom. If you like scroll over your screen, you should see a little like two little chat box with Q&A. Just click on that and then you can submit questions for us and we'll have some time to, you know, sit down, have a drink, talk about those afterwards. And so during that Q&A, we also do have the option to unmute you. So if you want to say your question out loud, just put in the Q&A like, I want to talk, and we'll just unmute you and you can have your 15 seconds of fame amongst friends here. So last thing before I turn things over to Jay, I know we have a lot of friends of the trust here on this call. And as you guys all know, we really, really like puns. So we're going to introduce a very easy drinking game for this virtual tour. And the only rule is that you take a sip of your drink, whatever that might be, every time you hear a beer pun or beer related joke. If you have any favorite beer puns, we highly recommend putting them in the chat box because we will steal them and use them. And I did promise Will that I would remind folks to please drink responsibly. Don't drink and drive. Hopefully everyone is like sitting on your couches at home, so that won't be an issue, but be responsible. Just like trying to have a little fun in our Zoom happy hour here. So to start us off, let's hop to it with Jay, the Washington Press Director.
Picture.
Oh, Brienne, that's a good one.
Good one. Love that. Yeah.
Oh man, this is gonna get silly.
This is going to be a very silly happy hour.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. As she said, I'm the outreach director with the Washington Trust. She and I have been working together to come up with ideas for putting Pints for Preservation online. So we're really happy that Aslan has agreed to work with us on this. You might be wondering why a historic preservation organization would be so concerned about beer, not only because our staff loves it, which of course we do, but as one of our board members pointed out not too long ago, beer saves buildings in a lot of ways. And there's, I've got this stat here, 7,500 craft breweries in the US and over 400 in Washington. So it's definitely something popular in our area of the country. And a lot of breweries make historic buildings their homes. And there are a lot of features about historic buildings that jive with breweries and kind of community centers like breweries, such as having really unique character and unique spaces, access or connection to local downtowns or entertainment districts or other types of great commercial districts. And often times historic buildings are more affordable than some new spaces, especially when they're old industrial spaces that are sometimes a little bit more difficult to adapt. So one of the things that I think is the most interesting about how breweries use spaces is that breweries need a lot of wide open space for seating and a bar and brew tanks and all that stuff. And so they're able to give industrial buildings, especially, a use that is compatible with the building already. And they don't have to add a bunch of walls or mezzanines or other things to make it an office space or a residential space. And so that's a really unique feature of breweries that I think works with a really large section of great historic buildings. And that's something that I'm just personally interested in. I literally wrote my thesis about that, not breweries, but industrial spaces. So I'm definitely into this. Aslan is one example of a great brewery that has utilized historic spaces, but the Washington Trust wants to put together a list of breweries that you love around the state in historic buildings. So we've got our little short URL, which is preservewa.org/beer, where you can nominate your favorite brewery around in your community, and we can feature it on our website, or even better, maybe ask them to host a Pints for Preservation like this at some point in the future. So with that, I'll tap Will to start the tour. Yeah, I did it again. Everybody drink.
Oh my goodness. You guys are raising the bar for silly beer jokes.
Of course, we did have a little prep time.
Also, I feel like raising the bar might count, right?
Yeah,
A little bit of
wow.
a stretch.
Okay, all right.
Having a sip of beer.
Wasn't. Oh my God. Okay, welcome everybody. What we're gonna do first is we're gonna quickly run across the street just so everyone can see the exterior facade of the building and get a general idea of where we sit in downtown Bellingham. This is Maddie. She is in charge of many things here at Aslan. Marketing and general helpfulness are, two of those things. So I'm really glad she's here with me. She's going to be our expert camera holder today. And we'll try to make sure she gets some beer too and gets involved, and maybe she can drop some puns on us too. Pressure's on.
All right.
Cool. All right. I'm going to hand the screen over to Maddie and we'll take a walk outside. Maddie, I have
All right.
Always unfortunate news. So we may or may not lose connectivity here, so just bear with us. We're going to see how far we can go. Yeah. Want to go out in the street? Give us a good pan?
All right. Here we are at the Aslan Depot. There's a big box truck kind of blocking our beer garden there, but this is the exterior of the building. And Will, can you guys see everything okay? Let's go ahead.
Yeah, looks great.
Looks great, and we can even hear you, so that's excellent.
It's perfect. Okay, I'm gonna cross back across the street just so you guys know what the outside kind of looks like.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
So this is the original facade of the building. Very little has changed in the last 100 years. The very subtle changes that we will point out, we'll have to show you a photograph to really delineate what changed. But brickwork, the original sign is up there. All of that is original architecture from 1960.
Jay says he wishes he was hanging out on that patio. It's pretty nice out today, yeah. Yeah. Okay. And of course, guys, if you want to see more of the space, just go ahead and let me know in the chat. And I can give you.
Yeah, we'll do some panning in that room in a little bit. Whew, it's hot. Got some notes here, guys, so bear with me. First of all, I would like to acknowledge that the Aslan Depot and the rest of the city of Bellingham is located on traditional Mummy and Nooksack land. And so I just want to briefly acknowledge and give respect to the first peoples that originally were here and their ancestors, both past and present. So we thank them for allowing us to be here. But with that, welcome to the Aslan Depot. This is a building that was originally built in 1916 as the original bus station for transportation north and south from, really from Seattle all the way up to Bellingham. There was a series of coaches that would take you from town to town, and you'd have to switch in Everett, and then in Stanwood, and then again in Mount Vernon, and then you'd get up to Bellingham. From here, you could take the bus north or east up to Blaine or east towards the mountains where you would see more logging communities and mining communities.
So they were loggers, would you say?
Perfect.
That was so good.
I told you I was a natural, I just didn't know it.
Why you have an assist?
1916, the town of Bellingham had been incorporated for about 10 years at that point, and the construction of the bus depot here was really the signal that we were becoming less of kind of a podunk backwater experience and a little bit more of a metropolitan, connected, cosmopolitan town. That is obviously a little bit relative considering the size of the town at that point. But you were seeing a lot more modernization at that point. And we'll show you a couple of the fun pictures that we have of what Bellingham looked like and what automobile transportation looked like at that time. But I should pour myself a beer. On track here. First beer I'm going to have is the Coastal Pilsner. This is our German style Pilsner lager. It's not really a flagship, but gosh, it's close. We have this beer available at the brewery and down here at the depot pretty much all the time. And we try to get it out to as many places as possible, but I heard it's kind of difficult to get. Anyway, you're just going to have to pretend you're drinking along with me. And folks, I will admit that I'm definitely more of a beer guy than I am a history guy. So I've got all of the information when it comes to beer and most of the information when it comes to history. So please use the chat and Q&A to ask questions if I'm just not making any sense at all. Anyway, I do love a good lager. Lagers are super fun, steeped in tradition, and very easy to drink. Those are two things for me that are incredibly important when it comes to drinking beer. Easy to enjoy and imbued with some sense of history and cultural relevance. We try to make our lagers here at Aslan as traditionally as possible. This means using very specific brewing and fermentation techniques to achieve as an authentic product as possible. If you do have one of these at home, things you're going to be looking for in this beer is a light, very clear body. My glass is already sweating, but you might be able to see right through that there. This is a filtered lager. A lot of our beers are not filtered, as you'll see a little bit later on. But this one we do filter to achieve that brightness and clarity that is particular to most German-style lagers. I guess I should have some. Probably a good idea. Lagers are generally pretty light bodied, though if you go back in history more than 150 years, you start to see older types of lagers that are a little bit darker and a little bit cloudier. But the commonly held lager these days is going to be very light with a pretty crisp finish to it. That's from, at least in this beer, Saw's hops, which is a very particular kind of Czech hop that gives it its kind of spicy, citrus-like finish. It's not hoppy like an IPA, but as far as the amount of hops that we put in this beer, it's actually pretty high per pound. And hoppiness is often sometimes a scary word in a world dominated by IPAs, but it's what gives this beer its snappy finish. And without it, you'd be drinking just kind of sweet malt tea, which is potentially appealing, but not as appealing as a crispy beverage.
Joshua wants to know, is that the proper glass for a lager?
No.
Called out.
I decided to pick a glass that the entire can would fit in, but also not be too exceptionally big for the can. We could spend an entire day talking about proper glassware. I think the important part right now is that you have a beer in front of you and you're enjoying it. There are several styles of glasses that are proper for lagers and specifically pilsners. They're usually more straight-sided and taller to show off the clarity of the beer and also keep it colder through lack of oxidation leaving the top of the beer. So no, this is not the proper glassware for a lager, but it sure still looks nice and it tastes good too, and that's really the most important part. You don't need racing tires on your daily driver. That's kind of the way I'm approaching this beer. I do consider this beer a very good product, but at the same time, we're having happy hour here, and we shouldn't be nitpicking too much. Given the opportunity to do that, I can waste your entire day. So, this is kind of the simplest beer that we make. Making lagers here has been something that we've only recently gotten into really in the last 2 years or so. And, you know, IPAs are the thing that have really put us on the map. However, if you want to pan over to those barrels over there, this is why we're in this building. All those barrels along that wall. And those are 90% wine barrels that we used for our barrel aging of our mixed fermentation beers. And that is the other focal point for beer production at Aslan, is our mixed fermentation program. Generally, those beers are informed by Belgian brewing traditions, and will often come out sour or funky or a little bit unexpected if you're drinking your average lager or ale. However, it's very fun. It's this interesting combination of science and art combined with complete lack of predictability in the fermentation process. So a lot of the barrel aging that we do here is experimental, I think is the best way to put it. And we'll get a little bit more into what goes into those barrels and what comes out of those barrels a little bit later.
These comments are really great. There's some good puns coming on here.
Oh man,
We've been accused of turning this into a brew haha.
Yes. The puns are getting a little out of hand, but it's very fun.
I'm too busy trying to say stuff, so I can't even think of them. So as long as you guys can bring the puns, we'll be good. I also need to have another sip of my drink here.
Yeah, cheers, Will.
Cheers, everybody. Thanks for joining us, by the way. I really appreciate it. So back to the original purpose of this building. It was a bus station. And this street that we're on, which is now called State Street, was originally called Elk Street when Bellingham was first incorporated, which hints at the more kind of country mentality that was here before the depot was built and we started to see more office buildings and more commerce happening here in Bellingham. This room that we're in is not actually part of the original building. This piece was added on decades later, but this avenue right here that we're in, this room, but also this hallway, rooms that are right behind you here, this was actually the exit lane for buses. So buses would pick people up in the back of the building, turn the corner, and come this way, and this is where they hit the street and go off to wherever they were headed. But you can see the original brick facade of the building back here. So this was the actual outside of the building before this addition was put on this side. So the buses would come down straight down this hallway, essentially. And we'll show you some pictures of that in a little bit.
Did he say what year that addition was put on?
You know, I'm not entirely sure. It's been pretty difficult to find that information. There's an interesting thing that happens with the city of Bellingham is that there's a lot of attention paid to this street up until about 1930 or so, and then you really can't find a lot of photographs or information on this part of town. So we have some great photographs of State Street or Elk Street as it was at that point from the 1920s. But then you just kind of, this building turned into an automotive parts store for about 70 years. And people just simply were not taking photographs or writing anything down about a car parts store. So we kind of lose the narrative for a little bit. But I can tell you that it was a car parts store for roughly 70 years. And then it housed the Bellingham Opportunity Council, which is a local nonprofit. And then we took over the building when they left. So it's seen a couple of different iterations over the years, but the most important part of the transition of this narrative for us was the ability that we had to bring the public back into the building. The most striking piece of history for this building to me is knowing that you would be coming into this building as a resident of Bellingham on a regular basis, regardless of your background. Pretty much everyone was taking the bus at one point or another somewhere if they were leaving town. So there was a lot of movement through this building and a lot of just human history. We hear a lot about people not visiting this building as a bus station, but visiting as a car parts store or working here with the Opportunity Council. So it's really nice to actually see this common thread of humans in this building over the last 100 years. What we were really most excited about when we opened the depot was the fact that we could bring the public back in. After maybe 15 years of it being a private office space, we were able to allow a lot more people to experience the space. And I hope we can give you a little taste of that today. Gosh, guys, I'm checking the time because I'm just rambling here.
No, this is great, Will.
We should go check out another piece of the building. We're gonna head outside. But we'll walk through the main barrel room, and Maddie, you can get in the good pan of the room, and they can see what we've done to it.
Yep.
The main room is anchored by a Doug's Fir bar, salvaged from a few downed trees up in the North Cascade National Forest. It's a pretty unique bar. You can't actually get this wood. It was knocked down and donated to us, but you can't fell these trees. This came down in a storm, and we were lucky enough to get the tree that we then milled ourselves and turned into this bar. So there's really not any other bar like this, to be perfectly honest, anywhere. So it's very exciting for us, to say the least. And mask up always if you're not at your table.
Have to get some close-up shots of that bar for sure.
Mm-hmm.
You can make that happen.
Okay.
You guys are on the live cam. Say hi.
Hello. This is Tim. Alex over there.
This is the bar. Kind of a horseshoe shape.
A fun thing to note as you're getting pieces of this building, let's go over here so we can show off this wood. All of the trim in this main room here is actually repurposed shelving from the automotive parts store.
Ah.
Absolutely wonderful. As far as recycling materials and really, maintaining the legacy of previous inhabitants in its current iteration. I think it's super fun and it's super neat to be able to see these old pieces of the building repurposed in a new way.
So will I have to ask about the windows up there? Because I've personally always wondered about
That window up there?
Yeah.
Gosh, that's just a window to a brick wall. That there is the original facade of the building that we showed you on the other side. The window, as far as I know, is just there to show the brick.
Oh, okay.
We've never really gotten to the bottom of that, but that's my assumption. Because it is important to remember, you know, as you're sitting around hanging out in this historic space, exactly, you know, what it looked like before. So it is literally a window into the past, which is, I can't believe I said that. Anyway, let's go outside. So I did mention that most of our barrels are wine barrels, but I would point out that we do have a couple of Woodinville whiskey barrels over here. I honestly don't know what are in those. My assumption is that it's an imperial stout, but a lot of these things are mysterious and only the brewers know what's going on.
And these are all currently active, right?
These are all filled with beer. Every barrel you're going to see today has some kind of beer in it, whether it's a stout, a saison, or a fruited beer of some sort.
Andrea commented, "No to the Pabst."
Oh, it may not be funny jokes, but they're at least silly and dumb. Wow. Okay, we're outside. We're gonna do beer number 2. Beer number 2 for me is gonna be Cosmic Dreams. I know a few of you have this beer out there in the world, drinking along at home. This is our brand new flagship IPA. It is flagship IPA number 2 for us. But to be perfectly honest, in this day and age, having 2 IPAs on your flagship line is not that surprising or weird. This was just released this spring. We have used the name Cosmic Dreams before, but we completely changed the beer this time around. It's a lot lighter bodied and a lot more of a defined citrus character. That's going to come from the Pacific Gem, the Amarillo, the Simcoe, and the El Dorado hops. And you'll see it's a pretty hazy beer, but it is sneakily light and refreshing. And if we're going to be talking about proper glassware, we're getting to a more proper glassware scenario with this particular beer. Your IPAs are extremely aromatic from the high dosage of hops that we put in the beer in various stages in the brewing process and fermentation process. And this little curve right here right at the top of the glass, that allows all that aroma to focus up into your nose as you're taking a sip. So that as you drink the beer, taste the beer, you're also inhaling with your nose and hitting those chemoreceptors in your nose at the same time. Because the chemical receptors in your nose and your tongue are so closely related, you don't really get the full flavor without adding aroma into the situation. So it's important, again, it's not important to drink out of this glass, but it will slightly enhance the experience. It's still going to be a really good beer either way, I promise. But one of my favorite things about this beer is the really intense kind of fresh squeezed orange juice with a hint of grapefruit. It's extremely citrusy without being too heavy or overbearing. And a nice edge of bitterness and finish that really ties it all together. I honestly couldn't be happier with our new flagship. This has been kind of like my go-to beer, I think, since we released it. I pretty much drink Coastal and this, hands down, all the time. But I'm kind of a one-trick pony when it comes to beers. I would like to point out, since we're out here, you can see the wonderful facade of the building on this side. This is all original brickwork.
I'm going to back up for you guys so you can see it. We've got our logo up there on the top right.
So you might have noticed that massive painting behind me. That is a mural done by our resident artist, or one of our resident artists, Connor McPherson. He's responsible for just a ton of artwork that we've had over the years. You can see his murals all over the brewery. We have this giant mural down here, and his artwork is all over the interior of the Seattle tap room. So Connor is very, very dear to us, and he does some amazing work. We actually just put up a billboard in downtown Bellingham with his artwork on it too, right across the street from the co-op downtown. If any of you guys are Bellinghamsters, you can go check that out. It's a pretty wild, fantastical drawing, and I'm not really sure how else to describe it, but fantastical pretty much describes everything he does. And we'll see a little bit more of his bottle art a little bit later when we try beer number 3. I certainly feel like I'm forgetting something here, so excuse me for 1 second. And again, guys, I'm really more of a beer person, so I'm trying to make sure that we talk about the building as much as possible. So I apologize if I'm forgetting anything. But it is good to note that we were talking on the other side of the building about how that was the exit lane for all the buses as they left the depot, and kind of where we're sitting right now would be the entrance lane for them. So they would come right by here and back down around the corner of the building there. You can see there's a little bit of a kind of white cement addition right down at the corner there at the very end of the building. That was an addition that blocked off the giant U-shaped road that would go around the building that would allow the buses to go all the way around. So that's another addition to the building that was put on relatively late. But it also affords us extra room for things like bottling beer, which you will see in a second.
So the building behind you, we call that the Annex. And I guess my question is, do you know when we added that on, or when it was added on? We didn't see that.
Do we know when the Annex, this building behind me, when that was added on? No, I don't. Relatively new construction though. As far as I know, if you look at photographs like up through the 1950s of this street, you see a giant building and a lot of other things going on over here that are not related to the Annex. So again, I'm sorry, I don't have a construction date on that, but it is not necessarily of the like great historical importance that the depot building to my left actually has. What happened to this property over the last 70 to 80 years has been that, as you've seen, they've tacked on little parts. So the original building, the original property and structure of the depot, is really just the brick. Everything else has been added on since 1930 probably. Because this building was the depot from 1916 when it was constructed until 1930. At that time, the stagecoach company that was operating the bus station was Puget Light and Energy. And they built the building that is actually now across the street from us. And in 1930, they moved their offices into that building as well as the bus station. So in 1930, this ceased to be... Sorry, we had a big truck. Ceased to be the actual bus station for Bellingham, and it moved across the street. And that's when this building was privatized and turned into a car parts business. I do have to say that this building has been owned by the same family since 1930, which I find to be absolutely amazing. That's 90 years of local family ownership of this building. And we feel very lucky to be part of that situation. The ownership family has been very generous, very helpful, and it's just absolutely wonderful to be able to operate in this space. Though it should be noted, we should show them the building across the street, because it is interesting to note that this building right here, the depot that we're talking about, was built in 1916. It's pretty simple architecture. And if you pan around and show them the Puget Light and Energy building across the street, you've got significantly taller structure and a lot more ornate decoration on the top. And that level of execution is kind of indicative of where Bellingham was going in the 20s and 30s. This is when you really see Bellingham develop as a city, with the construction of buildings like this in 1930. I think
That's
it's
a really interesting contrast.
beer.
Sorry, what was that?
I was just saying that's a very interesting contrast between the two.
Yeah.
Yes, I wasn't actually struck with that until yesterday when I was looking at both the buildings from the street and realizing that you can really see the development of Bellingham as a city in these two buildings that were both bus stations built 15 years apart. It's kind of wild. It seems to me like a very fast development economically and architecturally. But I suppose if you think about the last 15 years in any city where we all live, you've probably seen similar levels of development and urbanization. That being said, I think it's time for location number 3, beer number 3. Are you guys still drinking along at home? Are you poured out yet?
We've made so many puns.
We're still going.
All right, guys, we're going to show you some photographs as we get to our next space. Maddie's going to share some photographs with you. The first couple are automobiles from right around the time when this building was built. And then a couple of shots to set the scene of what Bellingham looked like around the time of construction of the depot. And then we've got a few fun photographs of the depot on opening day. And she's going to share those with you as we walk to our new location.
Can you guys see those okay?
Yep,
Okay.
looks good.
Good, good.
And I said I was going to drink all those beers, but I can't. All right.
And then just so you guys know, we're moving kind of across the building here. So if you have any connectivity issues, please let us know.
That's a great question.
You can see that tree that you guys have in front of the building now hadn't even been planted yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
It's pretty awesome. And this is the last photo, just the side. You can see the original siding there. Cool. All right, so let me get this. Let's see. And we're back.
It was magical.
I know, it's crazy what we can do.
Seamless.
So here we are, one of our storage rooms in the back of the depot. And while this is maybe not the most glamorous place to be, there are a couple neat things about this room. First of all, we have more barrels, which is very cool. We love barrels. Also, this is the back end of the building. So the buses would come through here, turn around, and go that way out to the street. So again, this is part of that addition that was put on at that indeterminate time frame that I should know, but I don't, and we can get back to you on that. Anyway, I want to talk a little bit about the barrel aging process and what that means for the beer here. I mentioned the term mixed fermentation a little bit earlier. What that means is most beer, probably 95% of beer, is all brewed brewing yeast called Saccharomyces, which is your standard brewing yeast. It comes in a lot of different strains and flavors that do slightly different things, but it generally behaves the same way in that it consumes sugar and turns that sugar into alcohol and CO2. There are other things that will ferment beer, not just Saccharomyces. There are other strains of yeast and other bacteria that will do similar processes. The main one that we harness here at the depot is called Brettanomyces. That's Latin for British fungus. It was first isolated out of a British beer, hence the name. But it's a very interesting little creature that behaves the same way as Saccharomyces in that it eats sugar and turns it into CO2 and alcohol. It eats different sugars and it eats them slower, but it will eat more and it will accomplish more over a longer period of time. It also loves to live in porous surfaces, porous organic surfaces. So once you put Brettanomyces into a barrel, it will stay there and live there and be super happy and eat whatever goes into it. So what we do is we put beer into these barrels, and the first time we use them, we add Brettanomyces to the barrel, and then it just lives in there. And every time we put beer in there, the population of yeast changes and fluctuates and grows and evolves and creates new flavor profiles. So we're never really sure what's going to happen to one particular barrel of beer. It's a little bit of an unpredictable game. You put things into a barrel with this idea of where they might end up flavor-wise, and sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong. When you're right, it's amazing, everybody's very happy. When you're wrong, that's normal. And what you do is you decide to blend beers together. So you might have three different barrels that all have the same beer, and they're all going to taste slightly different over the year or so of fermentation in the barrel. You'll combine those three barrels in very particular ratios to get the flavor profile that you're looking for. So while it is unpredictable and hard to harness, that's the fun, is figuring out how you take these kind of raw products and combine them into what you actually wanted at the beginning. So we probably have 120 barrels here, all doing very different things at any given time. I honestly don't even know what's in these. I wish I could tell you, but it's most likely a Saison of some sort. That's a Belgian style of beer that we're about to try, actually. But to be perfectly honest, we also do really fun fruit beer. We have a smoked lager in a Scotch whiskey cask. And we actually are about to release a Saison that we aged in mezcal barrels. So that beer take on a lot of smoke, an agave and oak flavor in a really interesting way. So if you're lucky, and especially if you live in Seattle, keep an eye out for that one. It's really fun. It's super weird and way off the charts. Anyway, speaking of beers, number 3. This is our flagship beer of our mixed fermentation program. Ironically enough, it's not actually made in this building. This one is actually made up the street. These barrels are pretty small. They only hold about 200 gallons. We have a giant oak fermenter called a fooder, which lives up the street in the brewery, which is essentially a wine barrel that's been turned upright on its side, and it's about 10 times as big. So it's a little bit easier to make large quantities of beer in a more standard, expectable fashion in those fooders. And that's where this beer comes from. This is Francis Farmer. We do this beer on a yearly basis. Every time we make it, we leave 30% of the beer in the fooder and then pump fresh beer on top of that and let it age. That means that this beer is Francis Farmer 19, but it also has Francis Farmer 18 and Francis Farmer 17 diminishing percentages in this bottle. That is true of the beer and also the yeast population. So this is a combination of several years and several ages of liquid and yeast all in one package, which is very exciting. Saisons are a Belgian style of beer that are generally very light and very dry. This one, with the Brettanomyces fermentation in the wood, has a little bit of extra funk and a hint of tartness, but it's 85 degrees today, and this is a great beer for a hot day like this.
Mary's popping off in the comments.
Okay, Will, you may have noticed I just had to turn my video off because I just did the exact same thing. That really
With the same beer or a different beer?
same beer. I was opening my Francis Farmer and it exploded everywhere.
That's amazing.
I apologize for those being exploded on at home. This is actually not a very common occurrence, but it is part of the experience. As I said earlier, these beers are unpredictable, and that unpredictability translates from fermentation to the bottle to your shirt or your shorts or your shoes. It's not perfect, and that is where the romanticism lies. Part of the fun of this beer is the fact that you don't know where it's going to go. This bottle was packaged probably 9 months ago. It has changed in flavor in the bottle over the course of aging in the bottle since we packaged it and released it. And it will continue to do so. This beer would be good to drink for at least 5 years from now. And over that time, things like carbonation levels, flavor profile, alcohol, those all will change and fluctuate. So we all managed to hit Francis Farmer 19 on a kind of fizzy day. Though if you let this rest for another 6 to 9 months, you probably wouldn't see that. Very light bodied. Very light bodied, kind of like the Pilsner, very light malt. This one's a little bit hazy because there's a still yeast in the bottle. That yeast in the bottle is what fermented the beer in a closed system. And we said that yeast eats sugar and turns it into CO2 and alcohol. If it's in a closed system like a bottle and it's still doing that, that CO2 has nowhere to go. So it goes into solution in the beer. That is carbonation. That's the way beers were carbonated for several hundred years before the advent of industrialized, controlled gas situation like tanks of gas and pressurization and fun stuff like that. So this really is a rustic beverage in many ways, harkening back to pre-industrial times. So saisons can trace their roots back to around 150, 160 years ago, and really originated on farms. And so there's not generally a lot of refinement in the process. You're seeing a lot of mixed malts in the grain bill, and again, a little bit of yeast still in the glass when you're pouring it. It's got a little bit of a hint of like lemon curd on the nose, along with a little bit of dry funk. That kind of dryness, that grassiness, that's all going to come from the Brettanomyces that was fermenting in the oak. This beer is amazing.
This is very good.
You get that wonderful high level of carbonation, and that's all from the bottle conditioning or the re-fermentation of the bottle that gives it its carbonation. That's a natural process, and it's really amazing that we can harness it to give it this wonderful, effervescent, fluffy quality to it that really balances out all of the other competing flavor profiles. So I will have to say that of the 3 beers we had today, this is probably my favorite. It just doesn't get as much as attention as the other 2. There's something about it being in a bottle that makes it seem more special. So I try to keep these for special occasions. If you're lucky, you can find different vintages of this beer. Excuse me. We do have 2016, 2017, and 2018, all for retail in various locations, and all will change drastically depending on what vintage you get and how long you've had it for. So it's a really fun thing to do if you're ever, feeling super frisky and you want to try 4 bottles all at once. You can get all 4 bottles and see how those yeast populations have changed over time, which is kind of fun. I'm doing my little jabbery thing again. I'm realizing we should probably open it up for questions, but I would like to point out before we go to questions, what you're seeing right next to me here is the original brewing setup for Aslan Brewing Company. Aslan was founded in 2012, and over the course of that first year of being a business entity, our head brewer and founding owner, Frank, brewed all of his test conceptual batches on this system in a rented space in downtown Bellingham before they renovated in a historic building to put their brew pub in. We could do a whole nother one probably up the street and talk about the renovation of that space because they really did a number on it up there. But this setup right here is the original origin of all of Aslan's beers. I will note that it is 180 times smaller than the brewing setup that we use today. We have a 30-barrel brew system. This does 1/6 of that at a time. So a factor of 180. Ironically enough, this setup is more automated than the brewing system that we use these days. But that allows us a greater amount of control up the street when we're actually making beer. But you know, this whole panel over here was constructed by Frank, our brewer. I'll show you this. I was looking at it earlier today. He wired this all entirely himself and automated this entire process himself, which is pretty amazing for someone who had really never spent any time in the brewing industry before he started the brewery. Frank is a man of many talents and incredible genius, and he's taught me a lot over the last several years. That being said, we should probably take questions because happy hours sometimes last an hour.
Yes. I know that Alex answered this question in the chat already, but Andrea asked if we can get these bottles in Seattle, and yes, you can. They're in some stores down there, but most notably in our tap room in Fremont. If you guys haven't been, it's really awesome. It's got some of the same art you saw out in the beer garden, and we do sell those bottles there.
Yeah, and I will say that if you're ever looking for Aslan beer, our Fremont tap room is going to be the best place to get it. They're guaranteed to have the widest selection of the most recent releases out of anywhere in Seattle. There are a variety of other places that will carry things like Francis Farmer and a variety of our other bottles. But if you want to be guaranteed for the best selection, the Fremont tap room, the Aslan tap room in Fremont is going to be the best option for you for sure.
Joshua is asking if we make any sours. What about in Tacoma?
Sours, yes. Most of these barrel-aged beers are going to be some degree of sour. Excuse me, I hesitate to use the word sour too much because it's not necessarily a style of beer, it is just a flavor profile of a beer. But this mixed fermentation process that we use with all of these barrels often results in sour flavors. Not all of the time, but a lot of the time. That's part of the unpredictableness of this fermentation process, is you don't know if it will be sour or how sour it will be. That's part of the excitement and part of the skill of blending these barrels together to achieve the right flavor profile. However, yes, we make sour beers. We have many of them. One of my favorites is Disco Lemonade, which is our annual summer release. That's a more traditional German kettle sour, so it doesn't go into any barrels or oak, but it is pretty tart, pretty light and refreshing. And we have a ginger version of that coming out, I think, in a month or so. So keep an eye out for that. It's going to be really cool. But we do have a lot of sour beers here. One of my favorite series that we've done has been the Dojo series. That's a saison that gets put into barrels with raw fruit, and the native ambient wild yeast on the fruit skins adds to the fermentation process, and the beer that we put onto the fruit will ferment due to the yeast from the fruit. So you get very wild, unpredictable flavors, but generally result in a pretty sour flavor.
Yep. Don't see any more questions unless there's a separate.
Yeah, we've had a few come in the Q&A box.
Okay.
The first is actually something I was wondering too. Why did you name the beer for Francis Farmer?
So a lot of these beer names predate my existence at Aslan. What I can tell you, so I don't have a definitive answer. What I have found is that most of our beers have roots in some kind of 90s pop culture. So there are a lot of kind of apocryphal stories about where the name Francis Farmer comes from. I do know that Kurt Cobain's daughter's middle name was Francis Farmer, and that's one of the kind of touchstones that we hit on when we talk about Francis Farmer. I do know that she was a famous actress in her own right before Kurt Cobain's daughter was named after her. But no, I don't know why. But if you're ever wondering about our beer names, I would always push you towards any kind of pop culture from like 1990 to like 2015 will generally encapsulate something. I have to Google a lot of our beer names to figure out what we're talking about. To be perfectly honest, I'm a little bit out of touch.
I will say Alex so our executive director, Chris Moore, said that Francis Farmer was a silent screen actress. Is that correct? Or am I making that up?
No, that's what I remember hearing. And I don't see a lot of interest in silent film here from my coworkers. So it's hard to believe that we picked it because of silent film. I do see a lot of people my age who started listening to a lot of rock and pop music in the early 90s. And that's when Nirvana was around. So I'm guessing it's the Nirvana connection. But even that does reach back to the silent film methods.
Another question we got is, how much does place, such as sense of space, physical location, history, matter to a brewery like yours?
A lot. That's a great question. There are a couple of different ways to approach that question. The first, most immediate one is something that Jay and Alex touched on earlier. Reuse of historic buildings is an exceptionally easy and generally cheaper way to find a home for your operation. And that was certainly true with us in Bellingham. Our original brew pub up the street underwent 9 months of renovations to get it to the point where we could operate it as a brewery. And all of that work was done by the 3 founding owners and one of their fathers as the head contractor. So they put a lot of sweat equity into both buildings, but I think the important part is being able to take a part of a city that you live in and perpetuate the memory of that building. And I think that's really where we come down, especially at the depot here, is bringing people back into a building that is imbued with so much history over the last 100 or so years. So there's the inhabitation of the building, sense of place. As far as we, as Aslan is concerned, we're a B Corp. A B corporation is many things, but the simplest way to put it is that we put people and environment over profit. So that means that we try to take very good care of our employees, of our community, and of the environment. And so place plays into that. We are centrally located in downtown Bellingham, and we try to not only be somewhere that people walk into every day, but we also try to be a place that is influencing positively the greater community on a daily basis. You'll see a lot of community service work, a lot of donations to nonprofits, and just general integration with the larger community as a whole for the general good. So that's, I don't know if that's place or community or how that really comes together, but we take our location in the community of Bellingham very seriously. The third way to answer that question is that we use and source a lot of organic fruit from this neck of the woods. Madison actually was down in Bo Edison earlier today, connecting with our blueberry farmers that we source our blueberries for our blueberry dojo. We get also some raspberries and strawberries from down there. Our peaches usually come from the east side of the mountains in the Yakima Valley. But even then, that's, you know, as far as ecosystems go, is pretty close. So we take our source of ingredients very seriously as well. We work pretty closely with Skagit Valley Malting, which is in Burlington, very close to here. And most of our American grown hops are grown in Washington. So I don't know if that answers your question, but we definitely consider our geographic placement very seriously in almost all aspects of our business.
I think that definitely answered it. We've also had some requests to see the bathrooms and the basement.
Bathrooms. They're awesome.
Bathrooms I can do.
Basement
is not really accessible in any logistic means, so I can't do that for you. There is a basement, but I don't
It's
think
also quite dark down there. Yeah.
I'm also guessing the Wi-Fi might not extend all the way down there.
I don't know if it would be very interesting.
If we could physically get into the space, we definitely would not get Wi-Fi down there. But I can show you the bathrooms, and the bathrooms are fun. I think that would be a really weird, ironic way to finish this tour is by showing off the bathrooms. So we'll go hit those real quick, and then we'll head back out of the front. And if anyone has any other questions, we can take them out there. But we should go check out the bathrooms. Just so I'm not talking too much as we go look at them. There's a lot of hand tiling that was done with some of our close friends and former employees. Vintage faucet fixtures. that all come apparently from a family home in Washington owned by a family named Swan. And you'll see why that's important when we get there.
I'm gonna put you guys down for a minute, 'cause believe it or not, my arms are getting a little tired.
You've been quite the trooper.
Yes, thank you, Maddie.
I'm not, super good at the tech stuff, so we're just walking around with my iPad.
This is, I think, the ideal tech setup for the situation.
Yeah, totally.
We've had lots of comments that people are having a great time, so we are all good.
Awesome.
I think this is probably the best one to show off.
The best bathroom. Okay, let's get my screen turned on here. All right.
So you might have noticed Aslan, or at least at the depot, but Aslan in general, we really like animals. So even the bathrooms are very animal themed. So come on and check it out.
Hey guys.
So admittedly, it is just a bathroom, but I do really think it's important to check out this tiling down here. This is incredible tiling, in my opinion. This is all pottery that was sourced randomly through yard sales, Craigslist, eBay, smashed into a big pile, and then reassembled as this mosaic. You can see a little handle for like the top of a pot right here. In one of the other bathrooms, there's a little mug handle sticking out of the wall. There's some really fun kind of weird aspects of it, but people really love these bathrooms, so we had to show them off. The other fun thing, again, I want to show off this swan faucet. It is pretty wonderful.
We just gotta figure out how to get beer.
Wow.
That's
Yes.
incredible.
Once we figure out how to get beer through these swans, we will be all set. That's really going to be the crown jewel.
A whole row of taps with swan heads at your bar. That
Ooh.
would be great.
These are some of the most beautiful bathrooms I've ever seen.
They are so famous for selfies. I think I've been running the social media for Aslan. You get tagged in people's selfies all the time, and you can see the zebras behind everyone. And it's really awesome.
That is cool.
You know they were here if you see zebras. There's really no way to hide.
As Josh just said in the chat, that's very beautiful.
Beautiful.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, Will, when I told you that we liked puns, I wasn't kidding.
No, I totally believe you. I'm just really sorry that I wasn't able to come up with more on the spot, to be perfectly honest. I swear I am a font of stupidity and silliness given the right circumstances.
No, you got a few that you didn't even know you were getting.
Right.
Better.
Intent and motivation obviously are, variables you can one or the other.
Well, you were also giving us a tour, and everyone else is just sitting and coming up with puns and furiously typing them in the chat box. So,
right, I'm doing the hard work over here.
Yeah, we're just drinking along.
I mean, now I'm just drinking too. I just in case we've wrapped up here, I want to say thank you for everyone for attending. As Alex and Jay mentioned earlier, we've never done this before. I'm very used to giving tours in this building, but usually there are people involved. So I appreciate you all watching along from home as I shout at an iPad. I also really want to thank Maddie for holding that iPad and doing so much helpful organizational work for executing this.
Yeah.
And same to you, Alex and Jay. Thank you so very much. Also, if there's anything that I didn't address during this tour that you still have questions about, I'm very happy to answer those questions on my own if you'd like to follow up. I think the best way currently to get those questions to me would be send me an email at depot@aslanbrewing.com. But if you do have any questions or comments, or you want to follow up on any aspect of the experience, please drop me a line and I will get back to you with whatever I can as fast as I can.
Will, is that Devo like the band?
Sorry, Depot.
Oh, Depot.
D-E-P-O-T.
I also thought
Makes more sense.
Devo would be really cool.
That
But,
would be super cool.
No, just Depot. Depot at aslanbrewing.com.
Well, this has been super great, Will. Thank you to you and Maddie. Everyone in the chat has just been enjoying it along with us, and everyone keeps saying we have to like share the chat with you so you can see all of the maybe close to like 100 puns. I feel like it was coming like every
Oh my God. Yeah.
30 seconds there from it.
I'll have to scroll back through in a second. That sounds like a great wrap up for the evening. Yeah, is everybody satisfied at the moment? Do I need to address any big question marks in the room?
I don't think there's no, you did all the questions in the Q&A, and we want to say thank you again. This was, you know, a fun new experiment, and I think everybody really enjoyed themselves. It was a super great tour, and I know we all can't wait to come there in person when we can.
Yes.
I know, I was about to say that I would love to see all of you in the bar at some point. In the bar is kind of difficult right now with outside being the only option, but we have a patio. You saw the patio, and it fits humans. So anytime you have a chance to be a human on that patio, we'd love to have you.
Awesome.
That's great.
Thanks again, and thanks for everyone who logged in. This seemed to be a great success, so I think we'll plan to try to organize a few more of these. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, thanks a lot.
Bye.
All right.